Okay, here comes the intro. Okay, and today we have the news. We love the news on this channel because it is going to be a mishmash of everything that is happening in our existence today. So, what we have is evidence of UFOs being tied to mythological creatures of old. There's a study by Jacques Vallee. It's actually a book called The Passport to Magonia that I have listened to more than once. Let's just say probably at least 5 times now. And he's actually overlapping the UFO phenomena with the myths and legends of old, like elves, dwarves, and the like, and all these other creatures that have been spoken of in mythological terms. So with that, I wanted to show some of the clips from some of the Passport to Magonia. And there's really nothing to see, but it's the audiobook that expresses some of these topics and terms and things, and some of the beings that have been spoken of in ancient lore, and how he can tie them into some of the descriptions of sightings of UFO cases and things of this nature. So let's listen to that. I also highly and strongly suggest that you purchase his book to support his efforts and work into getting all of this information out to the public.
Especially interesting to us will be the fact that these reports of celestial objects are linked with claims of contact with strange creatures, a situation parallel to that of modern-day UFO landings. Since these rumors have been puzzling to many authorities in the Roman Catholic Church, perhaps it is appropriate to begin with a quotation from the life of Saint Anthony, the Egyptian-born founder of Christian monasticism who lived about 300 AD. In the desert, Saint Anthony met with a strange being of small stature who fled after a brief conversation with him. Quote, "Before long, in a small rocky valley shut in on all sides, he sees a mannequin with hooted snout, homed forehead, and extremities like goat's feet. When he saw this, Anthony, like a good soldier, seized the shield of faith and the helmet of hope. The creature nonetheless began to offer him the fruit of the palm tree to support him on his journey and, as it were, pledges of peace. Anthony, perceiving this, stopped and asked who he was. The answer he received from him was this: 'I am a mortal being and one of the inhabitants of the desert whom the Gentiles, deluded by various forms of error, worship under the names of fauns, satyrs, and incubi. I am sent to represent my tribe. We pray you in our behalf to entreat the favor of your Lord and ours, who we have learnt came once to save the world, and whose sound has gone forth into all the earth.' As he uttered such words as these, the aged traveler's cheeks streamed with tears, the marks of his deep feeling which he shed in the fullness of his joy. He rejoiced over the glory of Christ and the destruction of Satan, and marveling all the while that he could understand the satyr's language, and striking the ground with his staff, he said, 'Woe to thee, Alexandria, who instead of God worshipest monsters. Woe to thee, harlot city, into which have flowed together the demons of the whole world. What will you say now? Beasts speak of Christ, and you, instead of God, worship monsters.' He had not finished speaking when, as if on wings, the wild creature fled away. Let no one scruple to believe this incident. Its truth is supported by what took place when Constantine was on the throne, a matter of which the whole world was witness. For a man of that kind was brought alive to Alexandria and shown as a wonderful sight to the people. Afterwards, his lifeless body, to prevent its decay through the summer heat, was preserved in salt and brought to Antioch that the emperor might see it." End quote. Again, with this story, we are faced with an account, the truthfulness of which it would be futile to question. The lives of the early saints are full of amazing miracles that should be taken as literary figures rather than as scientific observations. The important point is that basic religious texts contain such material, giving, so to speak, letters of nobility to a category of beings widely believed to be of supernatural origin. Such observations as Saint Anthony's will prove fundamental when religious authorities are faced with the problem of evaluating medieval observations of beings from the sky, claims of evocation of demons by occult means, and even modern miracles. The details and the terminology of such observations as St. Anthony's are not important to this study. It is enough to note that in St. Anthony's account, the strange being is indifferently termed a satyr and a mannequin, while the saint himself states that the Gentiles also use the names faun and incubus. St. Jerome speaks of a man of that kind. Throughout our study of these legends, we shall find the same confusion. In the above account, however, it is at least clear to St. Anthony that the creature is neither an angel nor a demon. If it had been, he would have recognized it immediately.
So that's just one account, and there are many in this entire narrative that Jacques Vallee has put out. Now, Jacques Vallee has credibility on many levels, and what I think that he's doing now is a huge service to humanity to look within for the answers of these UFO phenomena, and to also seek the answers within the mythological legends of old so that we can begin our journey back to truth. Because all things of this environment, this place we call Earth, which is also known as Terra, and the extraterrans that have been known in the past, subsequently that knowledge was overwiped and turned into myths and legends to become fairy tales. And why? For what purpose would someone wipe out the knowledge of other beings and other terrestrial beings that were known throughout the lands, but yet subsequently something happened? There was a great war, apparently, on all fronts, across all nations, and these beings became folklore. Who would try to do this? To overwrite his story, which is our story. We know that there's been a lot of overreach by the Vatican of wiping the collective consciousness, all of the knowledge. They're collecting all of the books, collecting all of the data that has been stored around the world. And Jacques Vallee even mentions this, that the Vatican archives hold a lot of the knowledge of the myths and legends and of all of these other creatures that used to be a part of our environment, a part of our society. But apparently there was a great war that made all of them scatter to the four corners of the earth and remain afraid of being anywhere near men. Now, take that story and think about what they've done with the Inquisition, marching around the world, frightening people with threats of death and fire and brimstone for not accepting their book, a book that God supposedly wrote. Now, God doesn't write books, men write books. So is it because there was this force of control that came across our worlds and started imposing their own will and belief system upon the minds of the masses, threatening them that if they speak about certain subjects and they practice certain pagan rituals, and which are basically nature rituals, even things of, natural remedies and all this was stomped out for fear of threat of death and violence, violent acts, torture, all these things were done. So fear dominated the minds of the masses. Again, we can read a lot of this symbolism in the astrotheology chart that I love to share. So why did the Vatican, which owns the Smithsonian, hide and squander away those giant bones? The bones of giants have been discovered throughout the world, not just in one area. They're pretty much on all continents, and yet they've been hiding them from the population. Why would they do this? Is there some truth there that they're trying to hide regarding the constructs of our world and perhaps the true Freemasonic people that were actually helping us to build these amazing structures that we call Tartaria, which I suggest that Tartaria is quite possibly not a good term to use, that it was actually a land of thieves who took over all of the technologies and things that were found there. And we can see this wave of evolution, of change that has traversed the lands. And now, from that last era of all of the beneficial technologies, as it is now fading in its glory, because there's very little remnant of it around to be found in society today, now look at what is being replaced with, because form follows function. And I implore people to go and research about Saturn and the platonic solids that they call Earth, which is a cube shape, and then overlap that with the knowledge of cube-shaped Saturn, which is the black cube or the black sun, and that's space and time. We're talking about Earth is space and Saturn is time. So that's why there's a black cube and a regular cube for Earth, and they overlap each other. Well, they don't want us to know about the black cube, and they don't want us to know what this truly means. But when you dive in, you will find out the answers as to why they're worshiping Saturn. They're worshiping time, which equates to death. And their hidden world resides beneath the ground, because that's where you go when you want to hide from anything that's above ground. You make a world underground. And the underworld, or Chibalba, has been talked about in many different cultures around the world. Xibalba is the Mayan word for the underworld. And what's crazy is that I have a book, it's on world mythology, and it even describes Xibalba. It was funny because I felt guided to pick this book up and look at it, just open it to a page, and it went right to the Mayan mythology of the cosmology of our world. So this is the book that I have, and I believe I got this from Five Below. Let me read to you what this says, because I believe what we're dealing with are the reptilians that are spoken of in ancient cultures worldwide. They're called the Naga in India. And in this book, World Mythology, it talks about the world tree in the Mayan tradition. The concept of a world tree is a tradition central to many world mythologies. According to the Mayans, the world tree, which is Waka Khan, kind of like Shaka Khan, formed the very basis of the universe and was anchored in the Mayan people's astrological observations of the Milky Way, which seemed to grow up into the heavens from the horizon. The roots of the world tree were based deep down in the underworld, which is Chibalba, its trunk in the middle, which is the mortal world, and its celestial branches stretching out into the heavens. The trunk of the tree was sometimes seen to be formed from reptilian creatures. The name Wakachan means erect serpent, and it describes the bright straight line of the Milky Way as it emerged from the horizon at certain times of the year. The tree reached out in the four directions in the mortal world and worked as a reassuring visualization for the Mayan people. The sturdy strength of the tree represented the strong core at both the center of all humans and the center of each important ritual, stretching out in all directions, connecting all mortals and all gods. Once again, we breach the subject of reptilians beneath the ground. Now, we know that demons are also associated as being reptilian-like. So, what are we dealing with in the world? I say, based on my own observations and opinions, that the underworld is on top of the world and has moved into the places to reside over man, to basically govern over man and all of his creation that he is supposed to be micromanaging at this point. That is our world. That is the land, the air, and the water, the true law that resides within this realm. And we have been tricked and manipulated. We've been deceived on all levels. And that's all that this entity or force can do, is deceive us. We've heard of the great deceiver in the Bible and in other accounts around the world, why can it be that this is what's truly happening? And that this force dons many cloaks, many disguises, in order to hide its true form and true nature. This is what I will stand upon as truth and the foundations of what is happening in our reality. And that's why I do commend Jacques Vallee in his approach to correlating the UFO phenomena with these old mythology stories and all of the legends of old that have been talked about around the world, and how each continent has a different library of various creatures. Now, I've spoken to a friend of mine from Peru, and they talk about a particular vampire that can don the appearance of just about anyone that you might know. Now, this vampire being can actually not only morph into different people, but it's found in the Jewish mythology, which is called a shade. Shayd. Now, we've heard of a legend of a shade being a ghost, like a Shade. But in Peru, I'm not sure what they call the figure because they have their own language. And I would like to interview him so that he can describe the story of all the neighboring villages that actually talk about the tales of people that have gone missing. Their bodies have been found sometimes where they have no blood in their body, but the full body is still there. And these beings that look like a woman, a naked woman that's bathing in a creek or a river, but hiding her feet because this being has chicken feet. These are the lore that are all over the world. You'll find all these tales from different places, and how people will express these tales that have been handed down for generations. And then now you can watch things on TV like Paranormal Caught on Camera and see that people are catching some of these things legitimately on camera, not only ghosts and UFOs, but also other beings. The things like the rake, Rake, that are pretty freaky looking. They're just pale white and they kind of crawl around on all four limbs. But yeah, people have actually been catching these things on video. I even know someone who has a friend who also has seen this thing recently in their camera. So these Ring cameras and things that people are putting on their homes, they're catching things, especially at night. Why night? Because it's under the cover of darkness. Why can't they come out in the day? Because the sunlight will harm them. These are the kinds of things that we need to consider. These are the moon stars. The moon is associated with darkness. It is dark light. It is septic light. It is not going to allow plants to thrive and grow. We would actually start to dwindle if we only had moonlight to live by. These are things to really consider, that this other world exists among us. And we just haven't considered it because we have not been taught about its presence, its reality of, and how it pertains to our world. Now, these things are spoken of in the Bible, again, but nobody truly takes that literally. But yet they'll believe of a man in the sky somewhere with a beard that's watching them and watching everything that they do. That sounds like Santa Claus, you know? I mean, if you're going to believe in one thing, why wouldn't you believe in another? Like the possibility of all these myths and legends being real and actually, you know, tangible events that people can actually go out and find on their own, especially things like the cases of 411 the missing with the Can-Am project. Yeah, I mean, these are real events that are happening. This man is on to these mysteries that are happening, of these missing cases of people that go missing in the national parks across America and Canada. His name is David Paulides. If you want to look him up and look up his Can-Am missing project, Can, C-A-N, being Canada, and Am being America, right here in the United States of America. He's been studying this phenomena for years now, and talking about these cases and how there's been strange phenomena that's happening where these people go missing, and he's actually made a map and created this map where all these different sightings and different missing persons cases are circling particular areas. So it's making an outline for us to follow and go hunt these things down. They're apparently going underground, and they're also using this technology, the technology of holograms and all these other things that they can do to make it look like it's just the forest or just a mountain or just some rocks. And it's actually hiding doorways and such. So, I mean, these are the things that are happening. But then also in the myths and legends and lore of Ireland, you have it where the fairy rings are a viable thing, where people warn you to not go near a fairy ring because you might end up in the fairyland, and then time there is much different. Like 2 hours in fairyland would be 2 years or 2 weeks in our world. So it's very different. And I explained this phenomena in one of my other videos where I explained the world seems to be like it's bubbles that are connected to other bubbles, and that there are secret ways of passage that are not known about, but the passages and portals that are there are possibly there at certain times, or maybe the beings on these other worlds actually know when or where they can access the portals. I mean, there has to be some logic behind it. It can't just be some varying force and all of a sudden you find yourself in another land, even though that's what's happened in a lot of the 411 cases. The missing 411 Can-Am project, they talk about how people were there 1 minute and gone the next. So maybe they walked into this dimension shift that happens when the two worlds meet. So we don't know how it works quite yet, but I do believe that we're coming upon the truth of it all very soon. And in the UFO community, it has been spoken of that these other beings, and it could be the gentry. If you go and listen to Jacques Vallee's Passport to Magonia, he will talk about the gentry that are spoken of in some of the Irish lore. And the gentry are human looking, they're like us. We wouldn't even know any different, but they wander the world and report any kind of troubles. And they do intermingle with the affairs of humans. So they want peace. Their whole goal is for peace. So could they be flying around in UFOs too? Absolutely. I've heard accounts of cases where the people that encounter some of these people that are flying in the UFOs have been nothing but benevolent to them. And they encourage people to also be very good to each other. You know, they've had nothing but good messages to share. And since our world was collapsed by wars, and it always will be, because we're always fighting the underworld, and we even fight amongst ourselves with our differences and such, and it causes all these wars and calamities. And so with that happening on a constant basis, this is almost like the battlefield for all things to be scavenged. Once a war has fought to the point where it blows up all the information and technology of the time, and then the ones who are remaining, who actually won the war, scramble around the world collecting all of the knowledge and information to rebuild it and restructure it to their design. And I believe that that is what's happened in our most recent past with all the world wars. That's been evidence that they've been just destroying the old world and not really destroying the things that they say that they're fighting, which are the governments. And if you're going to blow up a government, you're going to blow up government buildings, you're going to blow up banks, you're going to blow up your power plants and infrastructure, so they can't have anything to function. But that's not what they've been doing. They've been blowing up systematically all of the old structures and the living spaces of civilians. So this has been the problem. And we bought into their lies. So who's lying to us? I believe that whatever it is, if they've snuck into our world governments and they've been manipulating us and ruling over us by means of darkness, secrecy, all of this noise. Men are greedy. We've already witnessed this with the government systems that are corrupt. Men just want power over other countries, and they want money, and they want all of this stuff. But listen, I'm telling you, that if the people actually ran the world, it would be a much better place. But systematically, and even Plato and Aristotle and all these people talk about this, how man-made governments end up being corrupted every single time. Every single time. This is why some countries and people in those countries still abide by philosophy as a foundation and rule to be governed by. Because with philosophy, if you teach the value of philosophy to children, they can create a better world. That means do no harm unto others, do no trespass unto others. Live and learn by loving laws and caring, respecting each other. Treat each other as your brother, as your sister, as you would yourself. This is philosophy. There's no religion, there's no, governing body except you govern yourself with the virtue and the value that is held within that virtue. That's simple. It's so simple, but we can't do it because we're all over the place. We have no moral code anymore. In our society, it's been squelched. So these are the things to think about. And we'll go over some more of Jacques Vallee's videos so that you can see some more of these accounts, because this is no less than amazing. I am going to commend this person. I'm actually going to reach out to him. I'm in the process of drafting a letter right now. It's probably going to be handwritten so that it makes it more personable. But I have 6 pages. I just want to talk to this man. I want to give him some insight on what some of the things that I found and how it overlaps with what he's saying. The whole Yggdrasil narrative of the Norse cosmology, how important I believe that is, because it does speak of the giants very heavily and how they are an influence in our world. And I do believe that Sasquatch is the earth giant that is spoken of. That would be the Jotun. They don't really label it as earth giant, but the Jotun is for the earth element. So there are elemental giants. And Terry Carter has interviewed someone who has encountered the fire giants out west in Utah. So that's another thing to consider. I mean, all of these tales, they're still happening, of all these weird phenomena. And I believe we're coming back into our knowledge of all of these other beings that are among us and always have been. It's just people have been too fearful to discuss what they've experienced, because fear keeps people from growing, from knowing, from sharing and all of this. And I do encourage others who are out there who know some of these experiences, they've had these experiences, or they know people who have done it, then I do encourage you to share your story, because now is the time for the Great Awakening, for all knowledge to be poured back into the world, for us to know ourselves fully and to know our world fully, so that we can have the tools in our toolbox to deal with what's coming in the future. And that is going to be our battle against artificial intelligence. It's already been spoken of. Remember, there's nothing new under the sun. If you get into the Zoroastrianism, you will begin to know about Ahriman versus Ahura Mazda, which is the sun. And I believe the sun is so important in our existence that we have failed to recognize that when the sun moves in its path through the heavens and all the celestial heavens are on the rise through the accounts of the zodiac, I believe that this makes a huge transition in our consciousness, and it pulls us along gently as it traverses through the heavens. And that is what is truly going on, that we are completely one unit with the sun and all of this, what we call the stars, which are the planetary bodies which dominate our physical body, because we are them and they are us. This is the universe, the one voice system. And it's an amazing time to be alive, to be able to share all of this insight and to experience the wisdom of old returning to our foundations of reality that we know. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and play some more of the Jacques Vallee clips that I've saved. So here we go.
We shall see in the following pages that the occultists give a quite different interpretation to the same incident. The 7 visitors of Facius Cardan. Throughout medieval times, a major current of thought distinct from official religion existed, culminating in the works of the alchemists and Hermetics. Among such groups were to be found some of the early modern scientists and men, remarkable for the strength of their independent thinking and for their adventurous life, such as Paracelsus. The nature of the beings who mysteriously appeared, dressed in shiny garments or covered with dark hair, and with whom communication was so hard to establish, intrigued these men intensely. They were the first to relate these strange beings to the creatures described in the Bible and in the writings of the early Kabbalists. According to biblical writers, the heavenly hierarchy includes beings of human form called cherubim, a name that in Hebrew means full of knowledge. Ezekiel describes them in the following terms. Quote, "Their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps. It went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning." End quote. Are the mysterious creatures who fly through the sky and land in their cloud ships, Agobard's authority notwithstanding, of the same race as the angels? Asked the old philosophers. No, because they are mortal. Quote, "The Hebrews used to call these beings who are between the angels and Man Sadaim, and the Greeks, transposing the letters and adding but one syllable, called them daimonas. Among the ancient philosophers, these demons were held to be an aerial race, ruling over the elements, mortal, engendering, and unknown in this century to those who rarely seek truth in her ancient dwelling place, which is to say in the Kabbalah and in the theology of the Hebrews, who possessed the special art of holding communion with that aerial people and of conversing with all these inhabitants of the air." End quote. Plutarch even had a complete theory on the nature of these beings. Quote, "He thinks it absurd that there should be no mean between the two extremes of an immortal and a mortal being, that there cannot be in nature so vast a flaw without some intermedial kind of life partaking of them both. As therefore we find the intercourse between the soul and the body to be made by the animal spirits, so between divinity and humanity there is this species of demons." End quote. It is not surprising, then, to find that the philosophers disagreed with Agobard on the nature of the three men and the woman who were captured by the mob in Lyon. Quote, "In vain does a philosopher bring to light the falsity of the chimeras people have fabricated, and present manifest proofs to the contrary. No matter what his experience, nor how sound his argument and reasoning, let but a man with a doctor's hood come along and write them down as false. Experience and demonstration count for naught, and it is henceforward beyond the power of truth to re-establish her empire. People would rather believe in a doctor's hood than in their own eyes. There has been in your native France a memorable proof of this popular mania. The famous Kabbalist Zedekias, in the reign of your Pepin, took it into his head to convince the world that the elements are inhabited by those peoples whose nature I have just described to you. The expedient of which he bethought himself was to advise the sylphs to show themselves in the air to everybody. They did so sumptuously. These beings were seen in the air in human form, sometimes in battle array marching in good order, halting under arms, or encamped beneath magnificent tents, sometimes on wonderfully constructed aerial ships whose flying squadrons roved at the will of the zephyrs. What happened? Do you suppose that ignorant age would so much as reason as to the nature of these marvelous spectacles? The people straightway believed that sorcerers had taken possession of the air for the purpose of raising tempests and bringing hail upon their crops. The learned theologians and jurists were soon of the same opinion as the masses. The emperor believed it as well, and this ridiculous chimera went so far that the wise Charlemagne, and after him Louis the Debonair, imposed grievous penalties upon all these supposed tyrants of the air. You may see an account of this in the first chapter of the Capitularies of these two emperors. The sylphs, seeing the populace, the pedants, and even the crowned heads thus alarmed against them, determined to dissipate the bad opinion people had of their innocent fleet by carrying off men from every locality and showing them their beautiful women, their republic and their manner of government, and then setting them down again on earth in diverse parts of the world. They carried out their plan. The people who saw these men as they were descending came running from every direction, convinced beforehand that they were sorcerers who had separated from their companions in order to come and scatter poisons on the fruit and in the springs. Carried away by the frenzy with which such fancies inspired them, They hurried these innocents off to the torture. The great number of them who were put to death by fire and water throughout the kingdom is incredible. One day, among other instances, it chanced at Lyons that 3 men and a woman were seen descending from these aerial ships. The entire city gathered about them, crying out they were magicians, and were sent by Grimoaldus, Duke of Beneventum, Charlemagne's enemy, to destroy the French harvests. In vain the 4 innocents sought to vindicate themselves by saying that they were their own countryfolk, and had been carried away a short time since by miraculous men who had shown them unheard-of marvels, and had desired to give them an account of what they had seen. The frenzied populace paid no heed to their defense, and were on the point of casting them into the fire, when the worthy Agobard, Bishop of Lyons, who having been a monk in that city had acquired considerable authority there, came running at the noise, and having heard the accusations of the people and the defense of the accused, gravely pronounced that both one and the other were false, that it was not true that these men had fallen from the sky, and that what they said they had seen there was impossible. The people believed what their good father Agobard said, rather than their own eyes, were pacified, set at liberty the 4 ambassadors of the sylphs, and received with wonder the book which Agobard wrote to confirm the judgment which he had pronounced. Thus, the testimony of these 4 witnesses was rendered vain. End quote. Such stories were so well established during the Middle Ages that the problem of communicating with the elementals became a major preoccupation of the Hermetics and an important part of their philosophy. Paracelsus wrote an entire book on the nature of these beings, but betook great pains to warn the reader of the dangers of an association with them. Quote, I do not want to say here, because of the ills which might befall those who would try it, through which compact one associates with these beings, thanks to which compact they appear to us and speak to us, end quote. And in a treatise entitled Why These Beings Appear to Us, Lai presented the following ingenious theory. Quote, everything God creates manifests itself to man sooner or later. Sometimes God confronts him with the devil and the spirits in order to convince him of their existence. From the top of heaven he also sends the angels, his servants. Thus these beings appear to us, not in order to stay among us or become allied to us, but in order for us to become able to understand them. These apparitions are scarce, to tell the truth. But why should it be otherwise? Is it not enough for one of us to see an angel in order for all of us to believe in the other angels? End quote. Paracelsus was probably born in 1491, and in the very same year, Facius Cardan recorded his observation of 7 strange visitors directly related to the creatures of the elements who were so puzzling to the great philosopher. The incident is preserved in the writings of his son, Jerome Cardan, 1501 to 1576, who is well known to us today as a mathematician. Jerome Cardan lived in Milan and was not only a mathematician but also an oculist and a physician. In his book De Subtilitate, Cardan explains that he had often heard his father tell the particular story, and finally searched for his record of the event, which read as follows, quote, August 13th, 1491. When I had completed the customary rites, at about the 20th hour of the day, 7 men duly appeared to me clothed in silken garments, resembling Greek togas, and wearing, as it were, shining shoes. The undergarments beneath their glistening and ruddy breastplates seemed to be wrought of crimson, and were of extraordinary glory and beauty. Nevertheless, all were not dressed in this fashion, but only 2 who seemed to be of nobler rank than the others. The taller of them, who was of ruddy complexion, was attended by 2 companions, and the second, who was fairer and of shorter stature, by 3. Thus, in all, there were 7. He left no record as to whether their heads were covered. They were about 40 years of age, but they did not appear to be above 30. When asked who they were, they said that they were men composed, as it were, of air, and subject to birth and death. It was true that their lives were much longer than ours, and might even reach to 300 years' duration. Questioned on the immortality of our soul, they affirmed that nothing survives which is peculiar to the individual. When my father asked them why they did not reveal treasures to men if they knew where they were, they answered that it was forbidden by a peculiar law under the heaviest penalties for anyone to communicate this knowledge to men. They remained with my father for over 3 hours, But when he questioned them as to the cause of the universe, they were not agreed. The tallest of them denied that God had made the world from eternity. On the contrary, the other added that God created it from moment to moment, so that should he desist for an instant, the world would perish. Be this fact or fable, so it stands. End quote. It is impossible to quote the entire text of Kirk's treatise on the secret commonwealth, but we can summarize his findings about elves and other aerial creatures in the following way. 1. They have a nature that is intermediate between man and the angels. 2. Physically, they have very light and fluid bodies, which are comparable to a condensed cloud. They are particularly visible at dusk. They can appear and vanish at will. 3. Intellectually, they are intelligent and curious. 4. They have the power to carry away anything they like. 5. They live inside the earth in caves, which they can reach through any crevice or opening where air passes. 6. When men did not inhabit most of the world, they used to live there and had their own agriculture. Their civilization has left traces on the high mountains. It was flourishing at a time when the whole countryside was nothing but woods and forests. 7. At the beginning of each 3-month period, they change quarters because they are unable to stay in one place. Besides, they like to travel. It is then that men have terrible encounters with them, even on the great highways. 8. Their chameleon-like bodies allow them to swim through the air with all their household. 9. They are divided into tribes. Like us, they have children, nurses, marriages, burials, etc. Unless they just do this to mock our own customs, or to predict terrestrial events. 10. Their houses are said to be wonderfully large and beautiful, but under most circumstances they are invisible to human eyes. Kirk compares them to enchanted islands. The houses are equipped with lamps that burn forever and fires that need no fuel. 11. They speak very little. When they do so, when they talk among themselves, their language is a kind of whistling sound. 12. Their habits and their language when they talk to humans are similar to those of local people. 13. Their philosophical system is based on the following ideas. Nothing dies. All things evolve cyclically in such a way that at every cycle they are renewed and improved. Motion is the universal law. 14. They are said to have a hierarchy of leaders, but they have no visible devotion to God, no religion. 15. They have many pleasant and light books, but also serious and complex books, rather in the Rosicrucian style, dealing with abstract matters. 16. They can be made to appear at will before us through magic. The similarities between these observations and the story related by Phaseus Cardan, which antedates Kirk's manuscript by exactly 200 years, are clear. Both Cardan and Paracelsus write, like Kirk, that a pact can be made with these creatures, and that they can be made to appear and answer questions at will. Paracelsus did not care to reveal what that pact was, because of the ills that might befall those who would try it. Kirk is equally discreet on this point, and of course, to go deeper into this matter would open the whole field of witchcraft, which is beyond my purpose in this book.
So that's just a little sample of some of the excerpts. Jacques Vallee's experience, and also looking into these matters pertaining to the mythological world. So I wanted to share this so that other people can gain some sort of insight from its teachings. Because I do believe that we're going into a time where we're going to learn about all of these other beings or extraterrans that have been here all along, and that people have been encountering them all along, that it's never stopped, this whole communication process, and also sightings of other creatures. It's never stopped. It just was the fear that has stopped people from actually speaking of the encounters. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and just share all these links in the description box. And hopefully you guys will leave some great insight and experiences, or at least some encounters of your own or other people's. Please feel free to reach out to me involving your encounters. Share your stories with me, because this is the time where we have to come back into our knowing of all things. And with that, I'll bid you adieu, and we'll see you guys on the next one.